Hello all, welcome to i-tutor Academy. In today's session we will start with the unit 3, that is type of communication. Okay, so let's see the objectives of this chapter. After studying this unit you will be able to understand the difference between verbal and non-verbal communication, explain different type of verbal communication, understand the different type of non-verbal communication and their role in our life. And structure of this unit, there is an introduction part, verbal communication, type of verbal communication, non-verbal communication, type of non-verbal communication. Okay, so only two things are covering in this unit, that is verbal and non-verbal communication and its type, that's it. And the summary of this chapter is there, keywords and self-assessment questions. So let's begin with the introduction part of this unit. Robert Burton famously said that a blow with a word strikes deeper than a blow with a sword. So therefore it is important to choose our words judiciously and consciously, as it determines the success of our communication at a personal and professional levels. Our personal and professional worlds move on the wheel of communication. A person with better communication skills achieves more success at a personal and professional level as compared to a person who has average or below average level of these skills. And communication is essential in advising, counseling, guidance, mentoring, giving orders, delegation, giving warning, preparing advertisement and marketing, among others. A major part of our spoken words, that is oral communication, is supplemented by body language, gestures, signs and expression, and these are non-verbal component of communication. And Ronnie Overton believes that about 55% of the communicators' message is understood non-verbally. He also writes that only 7% of the message is understood through what is said, and 38% of the success of the communication depends on the way it is said. And verbal and non-verbal communication plays a pivotal role in general communication and professional communication. And so that's about the introduction part of this unit. So let's begin with the verbal communication. What is verbal communication? The verbal communication is the sum total of the time spent in speaking, listening and writing in a personal and professional capacity. In other words, we can understand verbal communication as the establishment of communication between people using oral or written words. The message is transferred from the sender to the receiver through an oral or written channel of communication. The verbal communication thus stands for both spoken and written communication. It can be one-way communication where the message flows from the sender to the receiver and nothing goes back to sender from the receiver, or it can be two-way communication where the communication is the negotiated between two people. The sender sends the message and the receiver responds. They exchange information, clarify doubts and work together in harmony to achieve a common goal. Type of verbal communication. In type of verbal communication, there is oral communication and written communication is there. What is oral communication? This is the most common and popular mode of communication in our personal and professional life. Oral communication, as already explained, involves establishing communication through spoken words. It can be formal, informal, one-way or two-way communication. It can involve a face-to-face interaction, telephonic conversation or communication through video conferencing. In other words, it involves a speaker and a listener. The speaker and the listener may establish a one-way or two-way communication depending on the setting. Oral communication can be of two types, that is formal or informal. Informal oral communication involves person speaking and listening to everyday occurrence like talking to friends, family members or colleagues on topics not related to business or other formal situations. Informal oral communication is mostly casual in nature and is based on social relationship between people. On the other hand, the formal oral communication does not involve casual exchange of information and is governed by organizational hierarchies and chain of commands. The flow of information which follows is controlled by strict codes, bound by time and structure put in place by the management team. The formal oral communication is practiced religiously in certain situations like interviews, over oral evaluation, viva voce and lectures, debates, speech, presentation, group discussion in a business meeting or in a school. Written communication. Let us now understand the second type of verbal communication. In the written communication can be understood as the sending of message through written words. In this mode of communication, the sender of the message uses written mode to transfer the message. The message is communicated through letters, manuals, reports, email, handbook, books, and the circulars, etc. Written communication is a very effective way of communication since it involves documentation that can be preserved or can become a permanent record for future use. It is primarily as a formal mode of communication, and unlike oral communication, it is not very flexible in nature. A written document can be used as evidence in a legal scenario, and hence it is a reliable mode of communication in professional settings. Written communication has its own merits and demerits. In its formal sphere, written communication moves very slowly as compared to oral communication. Electronic or paper form of written communication is destined to a waiting period, and the receiver cannot access the message spontaneously as in the case of oral communication. So activity 1 is based on this verbal communication. You just try to do it. And next is non-verbal communication. All forms of communication do not require the use of words in oral or written form. In this form of communication, the speaker generally does not exchange words. However, the communication takes place through non-verbal cues. It is an essential part of the communicative process, and various experts have opined that it constitutes more than 50% of the communicative process. Non-verbal communication may be visual or auditory in nature. Symbols, signs, gestures, body language, facial expressions, eye contact, physical appearance may be considered as visual non-verbal cues. And a platoon of soldiers coordinating according to the beat of a drum by following a pattern of different length and notes in their parade is an example of auditory non-verbal communication. Nonverbal communication governs a major aspect of our lives. We interact with the signs and symbols on a daily basis. These conversations are normally one-way communication. So, example, the traffic lights communicate with a very large group of commuters by guiding their movements for a swift flow of the traffic and controlling a probable situation of chaos. There are a number of symbols which are adequate for one-way communication. They indicate important information to us just through a simple picture like a motorbike or telephone to tell us important information we need in our day-to-day lives. So let us now look at the following signs and understand its meaning. So this is the sign language. The above signs tell us computer that U-turn is prohibited on the particular road. Okay, so such a non-verbal signs and symbols replace words and sentences, thus removing literacy barriers between people and the essential traffic guidelines. In road, you can see these symbols that will be understandable for all of you. So it's a non-verbal sign languages, and non-verbal communication is a form of universal communication which is not restricted by language boundaries, and the same sign and symbols can be used everywhere. These signs and symbols act as a tool to include the literate population in all major activities. Okay, in political party has a symbol, and a illiterate voter identifies the candidate through the symbol of the political party. Okay, so literacy is not the barrier for the communication. So that is the basic meaning of the sign language. And now think of a football or cricket match. These matches are attended by a very large number of people, and it would be impossible to communicate with the audience and convey the match proceedings. A cricket umpire makes gestures through his or her hand to inform everyone if the player is out or has scored a boundary. So that is also a sign language, that is also a communication process. Okay, so the advantage and disadvantages of non-verbal communication is in this table. So there is 6 points are there. So you just go through this table, so you will get the advantages and disadvantages of non-verbal communication one by one. Okay, you just read from your Ignou study material unit 2 of unit 3 of your MMBC 007, and activity 2 also based on this section. And type of non-verbal communication. What are the type of non-verbal communication? The kinesics can be understood as a study of body physical movement. That is one type of a non-verbal communication. It is also commonly used for the communication. In other words, we can understand it as the way of our body communicate without words and using various movements, hands, facial expression, eye contact, example. Okay. So next is physical appearance. In physical, personal appearance is not really part of the physical movement of the body. However, it governs our first impression in most cases. It is a prerequisite even before we begin communicating with someone. Okay, so the first impression we know, that 30% or 40% of we can identify people form opinion about just by our physical appearance. Physical appearance include clothes, hairstyle, accessories like watch, pen, or kind of perfume we wear. So these are the symbol of physical appearance. Okay, and postures, it can be understood as the way we present ourselves. It includes the way we stand, talk, walk, sit, and hold ourselves while we move around during the process of communication. Okay, it is variable component of communication and varies according to the circumstances we face while communicating our message. Gestures also important. The movement we make with our hands, head, or face are termed as gestures. Okay, so next is facial expression. Our facial expression are a integral part of the communicative process since it expresses the intent of the speaker. We can understand the intention of the speaker by looking at the facial expression, and hence it becomes important for the sender of the message to supplement his or her words through appropriate facial expression. Eye contact. Eye contact with the audience can change the effect of the message on the receiver. Our eye communication in various ways. A good eye contact with the listener or receiver of the message can make the conversation more powerful. On the other hand, avoiding eye contact may result in a disinterested audience and portray the speaker as weak and not confident. The audience may also have the impression that the speaker does not have a good command on the subject. It is important to establish appropriate eye contact. The speaker should not stare at the listener. Instead, try to establish eye contact to affirm that she or he is committed to convey the message to the listener. Sign language. Sign language is a highly developed system of nonverbal communication. It uses audio, visual, and audio-visual signs and symbols to communicate. We have already discussed that sign language is the most popular mode of a non-verbal communication. There are universally accepted symbols and signs are widely used in the world. So that is about sign language. Okay, so in this column there is yes, no, these are the sign languages. Thank you, sorry. So these are the basic gestures of sign languages. Okay, and these are signs and symbols used by such people to communicate. On the other hand, the normal people use universal and cultural symbols to communicate non-verbally with each other. The most popular universal sign is a traffic light and is understood by almost everyone in the world. We already discussed about that. Okay, and importance of sign language. We have already discussed the importance of sign language, so understand is better. The universal and cultural signs and symbols. We also have a highly developed sign language used by specially abled people. Think about establishing communication with people who speak a language other than yours. Okay, so then we can use these common languages. Proxemics. What is proxemics? It's that studies deal with the necessary or space distinct two people should maintain between each other during process of communication. And as the name suggests, it helps us understand the proximity, the state of being close to a person according to the relationship. Edward T. Hall, in his study of proxemics, divided the space between people during the interaction into four zones depending on the relationship between people share with each other. These are as follows: intimate, personal, social, and public, like that. The zone of communication in proxemics. Zone 1, that is intimate, that is the distance is 0 to 18 inches. Parents, child, partner, spouse, these are the zone 1, intimate relationship. Zone 2 is personal, 18 inches to 4 feet, close friends, relatives are there. And zone 3, that is social, 4 feet to 12 feet, co-workers, social gathering, work situations. And zone 4 to public, 12 feet and beyond. Total strangers, actors, important officials are using this zone. So there is a zone of communication in proxemics also. And next one is chronemics. What is chronemics? Thomas J. Bury, a scholar who studied nonverbal communication in detail, so was the first to use the term chronemics to explain the function of time in the communicative process. In other words, we can understand it as the study of the use of time in human interaction. Time is a valuable resource, and how we use it in our daily transactions define our behavioral pattern. If a person is late for an interview or a send late responses to email, then it is perceived that the person cannot use the time effectively and create a negative impression. So that is about the chronemics. So if a person arrives too early for interview, then it may be perceived a over eagerness of that person. Time can be monochromic or polychromic. So monochromic time system, Edward T. Hall writes that it is part of the popular business culture where time is considered money. So in the system, work is divided in small segments of time for effective scheduling, arrangements, and management process. Hall considered the American viewpoint about time as a monochronic, in which the American view time as a commodity and it should not be wasted or taken lightly as it equal to loss or waste of money. And polychromic time system is the time system is defined by multitasking. Instead of small segments, time is viewed as a wider unit where many tasks can be done at the same time. And paralanguage. These forms of nonverbal communication help us understand things beyond speech and sign. When we answer a phone call and hear the other person saying hello, we instantly recognize the gender of the speaker and the voice if it is familiar. And we can identify the person if we recognize the voice. We can also guess the state of mind of the person just by hearing the word hello. The listener can easily guess if the speaker is distressed or happy. So that is the paralanguage. The pitch of our voice, speech volume variation, rate of speech, punctuation, word stress, these are very important in this. And haptics. What is haptics? We can understand it simply as language of touch. The way we communicate through touch is one of the most basic form of communication, and infant communicates with his or her mother or other family member primarily through touch. An adult can also understand each other by this form of communication. Touching hands, kissing, slapping, hugging, etc. can come into this category of haptics communication. Silence. It may be intrigue how silence can be medium of communication, but surprisingly it is one of the most common form of non-verbal communication. A person sign on a stage suddenly stops and becomes silent. He or she will attract the attention of all the people, including those who were not listening to him or initially. A person accused for a crime can be assumed guilty if or he is remain silent when asked to present a defense. Okay, so silence also a kind of communication. And meta communication, this form of communication mostly deal with the interpersonal interpretation of the message by the receiver. The term was made popular by a English anthropologist and linguistic Gregory Bateson. He proposed that the interpretation of the message is governed by all the verbal and non-verbal component of the communicative process along with the relation between the speaker and the listener. A speaker may say something, but it may be mean something very different. And activity 4 is here, and the summary of this chapter is here. We have learned the communication is broadly divided into two categories, verbal and non-verbal. Both form of communication are essential in our day-to-day life. Oral communication is supplemented by non-verbal communication, and non-verbal communication is not just limited to signs and symbols, but it is included a very large pool of non-verbal behaviors. Our dressing sense, the pitch of our voice, the tone of our speech, gestures, facial expressions, eye contact with the listener, silence, our responses, time, etc. communicate with the other people and help us to establish a successful communication in personal and professional sphere. Okay, so keyword section is here, and the self-assessment questions also here in this unit. 6 questions are here. You just try to do it. It will help you for your term and examination. And what are the different type of verbal communication? It's a direct question. What is non-verbal communication? What is the difference between kinesis and sign language? Explain the concept of proxemics and chronemics, and how is paralanguage different from meta communication? How is silence a medium of communication? Illustrate with the example. So 6 self-assessment questions are here. You just try to do it. It will help you for your examination, and also you just do your assignment parallelly. Okay, so this is about today's section, and for more MBA videos, you just do like, share and subscribe our channel. Thank you so much.
i-tutor Academy presents Ignou Mba complete syllabus coverage classes for individual students, semester-wise subject with online and flexible timing. For more details, contact on +916 238 21785.